Hello. Good afternoon. I hope you've all really enjoyed the program. So thank you. And just once again, my name's Sam Stevens, and I'm a senior at BUHS. And I'm here today to talk to you about youth activism and the power that exists there. And just for a quick definition, when I talk about activism, I'm not just going to be referring to chaining yourself to a fence or some sort of protest like that, but just using your voice to affect change. Our nation's youth have largely been silent in the last few decades, but there exists a great potential there for change. And there are many ways that youth can and do become involved. But I'm going to simplify them into three major categories: youth as consumers, as activists, and as educators. Now, the first and simplest way youth can get involved is by using their power as a consumer. Harris Poll estimated that youth spend $239 billion annually on consumer products. And that gives us a tremendous buying power and influence on the activities of companies, whether or not we acknowledge it or recognize it. I mean, who wouldn't if, say, 10% of the teenage population stood up and said, hey, I'm not going to buy from your company because I don't support your practices? Who wouldn't if $23.9 billion started refused to purchase goods? Who wouldn't shift their practices to try and not only attract that consumer basis, but also to try to avoid the loss of income? And this would be especially powerful coming from youth. And that's because studies have shown that if a company can't get a teenager to walk through their door before they turn 18, the chances of them becoming a loyal customer for the rest of their life have been diminished extraordinarily. And U.S. companies spend extraordinary amount of money targeting youth in advertising, trying to get them to come to their companies, trying to buy. So if the youth stopped buying, if they stopped coming to certain corporations because of their practices, who wouldn't want to change that as quickly as possible? And as we just saw, youth have become extraordinarily interconnected through the web, through Facebook, through Twitter, things like that. And so in a buying movement where information is so incredibly powerful, which companies to support, which not to support, that type of information, youth have an advantage over adults, and that information can be passed much more quickly than with adults. And I saw that myself. The day after the Wisconsin legislature passed the bill banning collective bargaining for state's employees, the students of Wisconsin organized a national walkout. They organized that the day that the bill was passed. And in southern Vermont, we walked out the day after the bill. That idea for a walkout was transmitted so quickly through the web that it reached us in Vermont halfway across or most of the way across the country. And now, outside of consumers, youth can become involved through activism. And when I say activism, I mean getting out and actually becoming involved in something. And the reason for this is that we have a great advantage and disadvantage in being kids. Adults don't expect youth to become involved. They expect youth to be plugged into their video games and to Facebook and Twitter, and to be so wrapped up in their own social world that they have little interest of the world outside. And so that makes youth a much more powerful advocate. Additionally, there's little assumption of agenda when an issue is coming from youth. If an environmental activist stands up and tries to get a bill passed, well, then someone may make the argument, well, he works for the solar industry, he's going to benefit from this, or he's going to receive government subsidies. So you can avoid listening to somebody because of their background if they're an adult. But if a high school student who has no ties to an issue stands up and protests, well, what can you say other than, how can I help you, I suppose? Unfortunately, these same things that make youth such great advocates deter involvement and keep people away from activism. There is a great portion of the teenage population that is completely plugged in and doesn't really involve themselves with the world outside of their immediate contact. And additionally, the lack of connection to the issues that stops people from having a perceived agenda also keeps the issues from coming into their lives and becoming something that really comes through the door and you can't ignore it anymore. And I've seen this myself. I am a co-leader of a group at the high school, and we meet on a weekly basis. One week we'll have 20 students, which is a great showing, and the next week we'll have 4. And that sort of discrepancy is a kind of a result of this. And additionally, kids are incredibly involved, and there is I guess, a pressure on kids these days, not just to be a good actor, not just to be a good athlete, not just to perform well in school, but to do it all. And so kids don't have the time that you necessarily perceive that they do, or the ability to regularly be involved in something. Yet, when I'm talking about the activist and I'm talking about the consumer, there's a need for information. There's a need for a community of people. And the way that one would establish that is through educators. And that's really the most important of the categories that I've had. A group of educators who really take the time to understand the issues on a deep level and are able to communicate that to other youth. And when these educators are normally adults in our world, they're teachers, they're people who come into the kids' lives and try and teach them about issues. But when that educator is a student, when it's a peer, that sends a much stronger message. Rather than being an adult and it's an adult issue that I'm going to deal with when I'm 20 years older, it's my issue and I can make a difference. And also this type of peer-to-peer communication creates a sense of community that's absent when it's coming from adults. It makes it seem like it's my issue, that I can become involved with my peers rather than their issue. And this education system is in no way perfect. I was presenting in northern Vermont and at a school where they are allowed to have iPods during non-curricular activities. And as my presentation was non-curricular, a kid was listening to his iPod. I was the third of 3 presenters, and my voice was somewhat louder than the first 2. And when I got up and started speaking, I saw him turn up the volume on his iPod. And not even just like subtly, he kind of glared at me and turned it up really slowly. So obviously that kid is not going to get anything out of our presentation and is not going to be involved. Yet, in the same group of kids we were presenting to, after we showed a human trafficking video, she began to cry and was she felt so strongly for the victims she saw that she was brought to tears. And so while she may not run out and become an activist, she'll remember our presentation, and hopefully that will inform her decisions later in life. So I've talked a lot about how to become involved and what youth can do, but why youth activism? Why to become involved? The obvious reason is that it helps other people. We're living in a community, a world community, where there's a lot of problems and a lot of things that can be fixed through the work of youth. And that's a really positive thing that is absent from a lot of kids' lives. But another reason has to do with self-empowerment. I'm sure everyone here who has a kid, or is a kid, or was once a kid, remembers being in a situation where you're told what to do and absolutely rejecting that. Not wanting to listen to anybody else, they're not listening to you, you don't want to listen to them, and being very frustrated in that situation. And that's why a lot of kids don't like school or are frustrated there. Well, with activism, it's a place for kids to stand up for what they believe, and rather than listen to an adult tell them what to do, or someone in a position of authority, to be the innovator, to be the one telling other people how to do things and what to do. And that's a really powerful thing for kids, and a really positive influence on people's lives. And so as a conclusion, I would just like to challenge everybody here who is a teenager to really get involved, to get out and do something and try and make your world a better place, either as a consumer, an activist, or an educator. And also for the adults present, to encourage the teenagers you know to do that and to help them grow and flourish in this sense. Thank you.